How do we build an engineering culture that's really resilient? Get past fearful behavior, blame shifting, finger pointing, and get people into kind of that resilient, mindset where they're acting with confidence, they're acting with agency and all those different things. The organization is accountable for the outcome, not the individual making the mistake.
Everybody who's on those typically feels like if I admit to fault, I'm going to get in trouble. My team's going to look bad, my boss is going to look bad, and then everybody around me is going to suffer for that. And that's a hard problem to solve.
Got another episode of Tech Council. And Jason, I know you were deep in the weeds of the code of the DevGrid platform, so appreciate you taking some time to pull up and have some conversations here.
Someone's got to do it.
All right, cool. So today we've been having some conversations with different teams and, different customers and things like that. And there's just one topic that keeps coming up a lot, and we wanted to pull us together and just talk through, how we approach this. But it has to do with how do we build an engineering culture that's really resilient? Get past fearful behavior, blame shifting, finger pointing, and get people into kind of that resilient, mindset where they're acting with confidence, they're acting with agency and all those different things. And as we look around, we see that get broken in a lot of places, and then it's really hard to get it back. And, we thought we'd take some time to try to talk about how we think you would go about doing that. And hopefully it can be useful to somebody. So where should we start based on that frame? Like, what do you think is the first place to start?
Well, let's look at an incident, right? Anytime you're in an incident, the first reaction a lot of people will have is, it's not my fault. It's not my fault, not my team's fault. That's it. It's not us. It's almost like a natural reaction that's built in because they're so used to getting either scolded or blamed or, low performance review or something because they've messed up. So there's a natural inclination to go into a self-preservation mode. These individuals will say, no, it can't be me because of a reason. And any of the reasons, after a little bit of pressure don't hold up, but it's a lot of the culture that you see around either protecting somebody or trying to, keep the blame from being shifted to their team. And so it builds up on any of these triages over time and to say, not my fault. It can't be me. It's impossible. Why do you think that is?
Let's pull up that for a sec, right? Like, I think there's two, I just want to frame it a little bit because you said, I think it's a really good object lesson. The behavior that happens during an incident is an incredibly good picture into what the real underlying culture is, because it's when the proverbial shit is hitting the fan and it's crisis, of varying levels. And it's a time boxed crisis. It's not like, oh, we're in these financial troubles and there's like this overwhelming stress for like weeks and months on end. It's like, no, production is down, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, maybe even more customers are being impacted. What the hell? Right? Like it's very acute, right? In some ways, the incident's not important, but it's the behavior during the incident is just another behavior. But I think it's a really good thing for you to call out because it's a manifestation of the underlying culture. If you have a fear-based culture, then what you're saying is the perfect canary in the coal mine. We didn't do it. Wasn't us. You have to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
It was me.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to say that's a really good analogy for that reason, right?
Well, it reminds me of a time where there was an incident, and I'm not going to get into the details to spare those individuals who were there, but if they're listening, they'll know what it was. It was a 48-hour incident. A deploy failed. New applications weren't working. The first team that was pulled in, not us. Can't be us. It's impossible. Here's why. And it was a very thin reason, but when pushed, they just wouldn't dig in more. So we spent the whole day triaging, spent the whole next day triaging. And when I say whole day, I mean the entire day, 8 to 10 at night. Come to find out, those who were screaming not at the loudest, those are the team that actually could make a change and bring production back up and running. So this is a dangerous culture to have in a team, to say, not it. I'm so scared of it being me that I am going to fight tooth and nail to prove that it's not me personally or my team rather than solving the problem. And so now this 48-hour outage could have been solved within an hour. So there's real business risk that's happening when there's this culture of not it. So that's 2 full days that this whole thing was down, 2 full days of hundreds of hours being spent on this incident where they could have been doing real work. It was just triaging things because not it. So, and that's easy to spread. That's an easy thing to catch on like a virus. And it's mind numbing because you can't figure out anything else. It's just, this has to be it, but there's no engagement.
Yeah. Yeah. That's frustrating. I mean, I think it's instructive that you went with the incident was where your mind went. Cause I think one of the great gifts that the SRE practice, and it's a buzzword and, you know, in many ways, it's just another name for production ops. And it's just the new hot thing after DevOps. And as with all those things, they sort of get bastardized and watered down. But I think that the 2 core things that SRE to me really started to help emphasize in the engineering, in the engineering zeitgeist, as it were, software engineering or IT zeitgeist, is the blameless postmortem and also the idea of reducing toil through automation and things like that, and the mentality around those 2 things. But if we focus on the blameless postmortem, I think in places where we've seen that start to turn around, that exercise is one of the best ways to start to help people realize that, okay, you know what? We can move from blame to accountability. There's a nuance there, right? Like blameless doesn't mean somebody isn't accountable for the mistakes. Blameless means we're not interested in assigning blame or hanging somebody against the wall from a rope or pinning them to a wall or whatever metaphor you want to use. We're interested in solving the problem and being as clear as possible about what happened. If that makes you look bad, I'm sorry. And if that makes you look good, great. But we're going to be very matter of fact, non-judgmental, non-excuse making, just pure robotic facts about what happened.
Yeah, there was an individual that I worked with who was really good at that. And his team was involved in a lot of incidents, but on every one of these postmortems or incidents or anything in that world, he was very clear and concise. This is what happened, even if it was his team or not, even more so when it was his team. But not only did it help move the needle and help get better, I respected the hell out of him for that because he wasn't sugarcoating anything. He said, this is the problem. Here's where the failure was. And here's the steps to move forward and prevent that. And it was kind of refreshing in a way that somebody was so clear, but his team got better over time because of that.
Absolutely. I mean, it won't help but get better. If you have a culture where you say, okay, instead of, to your point, we're going to punish individuals for screwing up, right? Like, it's like the classic thing, like the classic joke is, and we actually knew somebody that this happened to, right? Like somebody new at a company deletes the production database or something like that, right? Love you, Alexi. And poor guy. But like, that's not his fault. Obviously, he was the one that did it. At the same time, like the system failed. It's not his fault. And I mean, that particular situation was unbelievably not his fault, but it was just a weird idiosyncrasy of a bunch of things that all happened at the same time. And he was new and had no way to know that that was about to happen. But in general, if the individual screws up, unless they've done something wildly out of bounds, where they're like cheating or doing something wildly inappropriate, you know what that looks like when you see it and be like, what the hell, man? Like this was criminal or malicious or just of a stupidity level that is so high that you can't distinguish from the criminal or malicious. And those things do happen. And like when that happens, that's a different situation. That's not a fear-based culture thing. That's like, hey, you're doing something that is inappropriate, not out of ignorance, but out of something else. The accountability there might be on the person.
Those are edge cases. Those are fringe cases. Those aren't things that happen. There's typically going to be controls around all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So you set all that aside. It's the system failed, right? Like if I did something and it took down production, it should have been possible, right? Unless I was given like really, now there are people that are kind of like systems admins and that have like real power, that have more flexibility. But generally speaking, those people aren't the ones that break things because they know they have all that and they're very careful. But yeah, if some dev puts something in that then breaks or, exposes a flaw in the architecture or whatever, like you cannot blame that person. The team, the organization is accountable for the outcome. not the individual making the mistake.
Well, I think the problem that comes in there is that everybody who's on those typically feels like if I admit to fault, I'm going to get in trouble. My team's going to look bad. My boss is going to look bad. And then everybody around me is going to suffer for that. So I think that's typically what I've seen, at least the sensitivity around admitting fault in front of somebody because you're going to have egg on your face. And
yeah,
that's a hard problem to solve.
Well, yeah. And that's why it's, as a leader, right? If we're saying we want to change the culture of the organization, it's your job to fix that problem. And I used to, using incidents as an example, I was a unofficial cross-organization incident commander at one of the banks, right? Like if something was dicey at the top of the house or was a huge impact, I would often be either directly or indirectly asked to kind of jump in and sort of grab the reins of what was going on. I spent a lot of time when you're doing that type of thing and you have a complex, high severity issue, navigating around it's not me is a big part of the effort, but you just don't tolerate that. In that situation, an incident commander is the voice of God in those moments. Like you have so much power in those moments. And I don't say that like in any sort of like power trippy way. Now, it's like martial law. It's necessary. You have to take control over everything.
It gets so out of control otherwise. You have to have one voice of reason.
You get the businesses in there, like all kinds of different people. And you just have to be very draconian and authoritarian in those settings. Otherwise, it's just a problem. And I've told people that well outranked me, sit down and be quiet, politely, but I've done it. And
sometimes not so politely.
Well, there was one that came back at me, but my boss just laughed because he was there. And he's like, he absolutely did the right thing. I'm not going to give him a hard time. My point in all that is in that moment, I was the authority figure and I would always try to do two things. One, people didn't get to weasel out of stuff. If you get weaselly, I am actually going to dig deeper because you're not demonstrating to me that you're putting the scrutiny on yourself that you should be. I'm not going to put the scrutiny on you. So we would do that. If there was any reason to suspect that was the area, we would just not tolerate weaselly behavior. And then the other thing is you didn't ever say things like, what the hell, guys? You just never did that in the room. Like the room was serene in that sense. It was very unemotional. It was very non-judgmental. And that's actually usually the thing I had to yell at people. That was usually the thing where I would be cutting people off and kicking them out of the room. Because I remember one time in particular, one of the business ops guys tried to jump in. It was just attacking somebody. And I was like, nope. I literally was like, this is your last warning before I kick you out of the room. And I had to do it.
Back to the comment before is that it's going to stagnate any meeting that you're in if somebody's starting to blame because everybody will see who's talking, who the seniority is of that person because everybody looks it up. I know that. You got the team's hierarchy. It happens. And so that then it will shut everybody down. I've seen it with my team. Some bigwig comes in, starts firing away at comments. The whole room freezes. And it takes an incident commander that says, whatever, move on. I'm not tolerating that. It's a must to have somebody that's going to shove away the blame and focus on the outcomes and the results.
The incident commander are incredible proxies for what you have to do in your day-to-day. So the real way you solve these types of cultural issues are 1,000 little decisions at once. It's like the Ted Lasso thing, right? Like there's the moment when the reporter who's writing the book in like the last season, he like has this like freak out moment in the hallway and he's saying, it's all going to work. It's all going to work. It's like, because of the 3 years of these tiny imperceptible changes which you are building up a culture of trust and blah, 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 blah. I forget the exact words, right? But that's actually real. That's why that show is so compelling to people because that is actually how you build a culture. It's not with big sweeping, this is our culture. It's day-to-day choices and day-to-day activities is your culture. Ben Horowitz wrote a great book on this.
Like what you do is who you are.
That was one of the first people that really kind of said that, I think, in at least the literature that I read, right? Like, forget all your nonsense. It's your day-to-day activities that set your culture. And so you just have to remember that. And so as the leader, you cannot tolerate weasel behavior. The people that are actively avoiding blame cannot be tolerated because it's cancerous.
Yeah, and it starts with you, starting that with yourself, not just in a big, large meeting. It starts with the one-on-one individual meetings. It starts with talking about like, yeah, my team probably could have done better here. Yeah, I probably should have given them more, more something. This starts with your team, building it up. Then it builds to a larger group, a team meeting, team organization meeting. But that will grow. I've seen it grow. I've seen it where those blameless topics start to overpower the blameful meetings. And those individuals look like the outsiders. Those individuals look like the weasels who it's just not welcome anymore. And so then the group mind takes over and almost ignores them, and it gets filtered out because it's just not tolerated as a group.
You have to model that accountability. As the leader for your sphere, you own the failures, the outcomes that aren't working. You should look at it in a very matter-of-fact way about yourself. Like, it's useful. It's actually the most productive and healthy psychological way to be anyways. Forget the fact that it actually makes you stronger as an employee, as a leader, as a person. It's also the truth, right? Like, hey, this is how we failed. That you don't have to point fingers. You don't have to, like, you can, and honestly, and one of the best ways you can do this type of stuff, if you're in an environment where maybe you're a team leader, an app manager or whatever, and maybe your boss is not the most fair on these things, right? Or maybe they're a little blameful, right? Like fear-based. It's like, well, one of the things you can do is by taking responsibility for the things that you actually are responsible for, you take the wind out of accusations. It's like the old 8 Mile thing, right?
It's the hardest thing to do.
Because when you walk in and you say, hey, I suck at this, we've messed this up, we did this is how we're going to try and fix it. No one's going to say it. You got nothing left to say.
They got nothing.
And you control the narrative then. Here's the things that we messed up, and here's how we're fixing it, and here's how we did great, or in whatever order. But now you're saying, hey, anybody even remotely worth their salt's like, this person's got their act together. I don't have to give them a hard time because they, like, honestly, like I'm kind of a hard ass in some situations, obviously as a boss, but like most of the time, like very rarely would I ever actually have to be, because most of the people that I would work with are self-accountable, and you don't actually have to, because they're going to be hard on themselves in a productive way. So your job is to just make sure that they see the things, because sometimes they don't see it, right? And then help encourage them in their improvement instead of, having to beat them over the head with they've got issues and you just have to be, and sometimes that happens because people just won't listen and all that type of stuff. But most of the time, like with good people that I've worked with, mostly it's having a conversation about what worked and what didn't. And then they realize what didn't work, and there's a natural sense of accountability and a natural sense of how we're going to do better. And that's it. Like if you do that, you build trust with your boss, with your team, and like a mistake isn't the end of the world, right? Like a mistake that keeps happening over and over again because you haven't closed the gap becomes a different problem, but that doesn't happen if you're doing this, generally speaking.
And if you're hiring the right people, like you said, it comes with hiring the right people and starting early with building that trust and being vulnerable with them and say, here's where I'm going to need some gaps filled from you. Here's what I'm not great at. But it starts day one. And it just to build that and build the repetition of, hey, you know what? We're both not going to be good at things, but here's where I'm going to need from you. And it got to the point at a previous job where I didn't have to beat anybody up anymore. They were they beat themselves up, and it was just a coaching session after that. And it was seamless. I didn't have to push. I didn't have to put pressure, because you could see by the responses by all the individuals is that they were putting a ton of pressure on themselves to get better.
Once you've built the culture, you don't have to push on the problems as much, because the thing kind of naturally takes care of itself. I think back to one CIO that I worked with, and he was an interesting dichotomy on this issue, because on the one hand, he was incredibly protective and gentle and understanding of his own team's mistakes and failures. He would not lead with fear at all, but he wouldn't take accountability at the same degree to which he was understanding. That kind of caused some issues, because what ended up happening is problems persist then. We're not going to take anybody's head off for the fact that they took down production for the 3rd time this month. But at the same time, like, there isn't this kind of underlying threat of like, guys, what the hell is going on? Why does this keep happening? How do we prevent this from happening in the future? Like, let's get in a room and let's take this seriously. I'm going to hold you as the leader accountable for putting something in place that prevents this from happening again. This isn't even a criticism of that person, because it's a hard balance to strike. That particular company has a culture of overt niceness, right? The culture was nice.
It comes to that niceness, but what I've seen is where some of this can get sideways is, yes, your niceness on the surface, but then there's individuals who can take advantage of that niceness, and they go on the attack mode. You as a leader have to be holding the line as well to those that might come after your team and try to blame them. There's a balance there to strike of blameless versus, not tolerating another individual for attempting to blame even privately or in a side conversation, because that can be just as brutal to the culture as the public ones. It can make things really go sour really quickly because those conversations are never private. At some point or another, they're heard about or they know about this individual. The rumor mill is strong where your team will find out one way or the other because that culture will, maybe not the conversation directly, but they'll know that they're under the magnifying glass. They'll know that they're getting blamed for things privately.
You can only influence so much, right? Like if you're at a large corporation, if you're not the top of the heap, you have a lot of influence, but you can't completely change things, right? It's kind of a trope from different types of philosophers and stuff, right? Like if you want to change, you shouldn't go out and try and change the world. First, change yourself and then change your family. And then by changing yourself and changing your family, you'll impact your community, which will impact your city, which will impact your locality, your state, your country, the world, right? That's a pretty healthy thing as an individual to sort of take on that sort of an approach instead of I'm going to go do social change or whatever. But I think that's also really useful in corporations too, because I've seen it over and over with people that are high integrity and high skill in these environments. Their presence causes an impact. And it's like beyond their reporting structure. You can make your boss better. And by making your boss better, that'll make their boss better. And when I say better, I don't just mean like put a nice paint job on something. Like I've been influenced by people that worked for me. I've gotten better at being a leader, at being a person because the people that worked for me would call me out on stuff, or not even just call me out on it, but like model positive behaviors in front of me. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I really admire how Jason does that. I wish I was more like that. I should be more like that. Let's put some intentionality to that, right? Like those types of things. And so, that's the thing I'd say is like for people that don't feel like they have enough power to influence it, even if you're like a very senior person, got 1,000 people working for you, but your boss has 10,000 and you're like, well, he said that person sets the culture and the culture is cutthroat and all those different things, that you don't have to play that game. Right? Like you don't actually have to sign up for it. And I know I'm bringing my own personal biases to that conversation. And I've lost some of those wars by being more open. And I've gotten my legs taken out by people that were not as honest as I was. And you know what? I was better for it. Like it's still a better deal to do that than to play that game in a way that compromises your values. And because it's not fun. Like it's a lot more fun to work on a team where everybody wants to get better and nobody's scared. Like we work at some of these companies and you see this like culture of fear rolling around. It's like no one's enjoying themselves. They all hate their jobs.
You got to have a little bit of, I don't want to say fear, but that if you mess up, you're letting your team down. There's got to be a balance though of just enough of not fear. That's not the right term for it, but the internal pressure to know that if you mess up, you are letting your team down. You're letting the company down. But that's not the same thing as fear or scaring somebody. It's making sure that the accountability is known, is pressed. It's also very public that if you mess up, we're not going to fire you for the first instance, but you've got to keep yourself accountable for this. Or the culture of blameless but not accountable can easily take over because everybody knows that if I mess up, nothing is going to happen to me.
Yeah, we've seen that. It's terrible.
It's just as dangerous as the other side of fear-based.
I would rather be personally, I hate that. Like it's actually so toxic. It drives, like I cannot stand it. I would rather be in an overly authoritarian, overly fear-based organization because at least there's some fairness to it. It's not ideal. It's not always right. It's not always fair. I would rather be in an over-the-top accountability than no accountability, because no accountability is just chaos, and people are being rewarded that shouldn't be rewarded is somehow worse than people getting more grief than they should. Right? Like at least for me, again, that's a personal preference, but like it drives me crazy.
But if you were to even calculate just how much waste you have just by having little accountability, it would likely blow everybody's mind with how much you're wasting on having to have individuals who are there, who shouldn't be there, who are bringing your entire organization down. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that are just wasted and burned by keeping people there who shouldn't be there. Or maybe not in that position. Maybe they just need to be successful in another position. But by not having that accountability, you are being so much less effective at delivering results than you could be.
And I would also say, as a leader, you're not doing anybody any favors. I don't want to be too hard on this person, or it's like this kind of toxic empathy or whatever. Like, you're not leading. They should be held accountable for what they're doing, because all you're doing is creating a false sense of security, because the value proposition of what they're doing and what they think they're doing are drifting apart from each other. And that's not good for anybody. It's like a form of mental illness.
And mediocre becomes a target.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and mediocre and even bad, right? If there's no standard. I'm not exactly an Alabama football fan, but I do like this thing that Saban talked about, where he would talk about, you play to your standard, right? Like, it didn't matter what the game was, you played to your standard, and you have to set a high standard, and you work to play to it. One of the other beautiful things about that is really high trust within each other. Like, let's use you and me, right? Like, if you needed a week off for, like, I mean, obviously vacations or whatever, but if you were like, if something came up or whatever, like, and you needed time, like, I know you well enough. I know your sense of accountability. It wouldn't bother me at all, right? Like, it wouldn't. I'm like, cool. Yeah, whatever you need, man. Like, it's fine. Whereas if you're on a team when, and everybody's kind of shady and lame and don't take accountability for things, it's like, oh, okay, of course Jason's taking time off because he doesn't want to deal with this problem or whatever it is. And like, and then this is all this crap between people, and it's just not good. And it's way better if everybody's pulling on the oars as hard as they can. And that doesn't mean at the same level, but doing their best. And honestly, we're all happier if we're doing our best. So, as a leader, model it and expect it. Call it out really clearly. Take accountability for things in front of people, both privately, because those are different conversations and they have different levels of impact, right? Privately, but then also inform, like, say, hey, this is what we did well. This is what we didn't do well. Like, it's one of my things I hate the most about all hands and all those different types of things is they're complete pat ourselves on the back fests.
They need to be sometimes, though. To be fair, they need to be a public celebration at times.
Totally. And I'm not saying you should get in there and everybody should go, ashes and sackcloth or anything like that. You were there actually for this. We were in an offsite once. It was kind of like that. It was kind of turned into the celebrate. It was like the 2 down from the head of technology's offsite. And he's taking Q&A and everybody's asking all these sort of celebratory pat ourselves in the back questions. And then he I don't remember if he put me on the spot or if I put myself on the spot. It could have been either, but I was like, we're all here. Let's have a real conversation. What do we suck at? Right? Like, it's not quite what I said, but that's basically what I said. Like, what do we need? You're the boss. What do you want from us? What do we need to do better? He gave me some hilarious cliche answer because that was tied into everything else. And then he paused and he then said something. And the genius of what he said is, like, this guy will never say anything negative from the stage, as it were. Like, he is the consummate positive salesman. I really like the guy. He drives me crazy. I'm an engineer. All I do is see problems, right? Like, all I can see is the problems. And all he sees is the good stuff. And even rose-colored glasses on the good stuff, on the mediocre stuff. And so it always drove me crazy, but I really respected that he didn't compromise that, but he actually did answer my question. So he turned back and then he said something. It was extremely veiled. I don't remember what it was, and I wouldn't say here anyway, so it's not appropriate, but like, it was one of those things where if you had ears to hear it, you could hear what he was saying, and had to do something with, like, you guys don't cooperate. You're all in your own little fiefdoms and you're all in your own little bubbles and you only care about your shit. And you don't care about the whole, was essentially what he was saying. But he didn't say that.
It was brilliant. It was a brilliant comment.
People kept coming up to me and like, oh, you didn't really answer your question. And I was like, actually you did. You just don't know. You're just not looking for it. And you don't hear it. And I always thought that was a pretty interesting interaction. I've had multiple conversations with him, like, how do I reconcile these things? But yeah, I mean, there's something to it. Like, get up there and also say how you need to get better. And it doesn't have to be this negative thing. Right? That's the thing I learned from this guy, right? Is like, the people that are going to be high accountability, and like, so he's got what, 10,000 people working for him. So it's a big organization, right? And it's like, the people that are going to be high accountability and can hear it will hear it. And the ones that can't, it'll go over their heads and there'll be no pain associated with it. Now, if I get up there and I, fire and brimstone, you all suck, you're all terrible, da, 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 like, everybody hears that and there's a negative impact and maybe a little bit of positive impact, right? So that was, I always thought that was an interesting approach. If you're someone that doesn't want to, call things out, feels uncomfortable calling things out, that's a great way to do it. Like, put a positive spin on it, but still say, these are the areas we got to get better. We had these many incidents. We improved our incident rate by X, Y percentage. Our target is Y. We're trying to get there. We're working hard on getting there, right? Like, that's a great way to frame it.
It's spot on. A lot of people think that you have to be direct in your feedback. A lot of people think that you have to just go for the jugular with feedback and just be very clear and concise. But that's just not the reality of it. And it's not, you don't have to be a leader who's, just, I'm a straight shooter and you're just going to get my direct raw thoughts out of this. And that's just not reality. The best thing you can be is a coach or a mentor in these scenarios, and say what's on your mind, but in a way where you focus on the improvements, focus on the goals, focus on the targets, and say, hey, look, we can all chip in to get there. And even if we get 90% there, that's pretty okay. But this is where we're aiming for. We didn't hit it. Here's what we have to improve on. But it just starts with you. It just starts with you to be that resilient, even in the face of somebody saying it's your fault. Say, you might be right, and here's why, but here's how we can improve. Take the wind out of it, take the teeth, and it dies.
Awesome. Thanks for the time. Thanks, everybody. Hope this was helpful, and we'll talk soon.